Thoughts on Julian Sayin passing Aaron Noland on the depth chart?
My thought is there is no depth chart for the true freshman, and to put one over the other would be putting one into the transfer portal. So don't do it. Just treat them all equally as if they're your twin sons, and you don't want to turn one into the evil twin and the other into the good twin. So just keep them both medium twins.
Yeah, I think Tony hit it on the head last week. He kind of corrected me. I thought Howard would start out, and be the number one. But I agree it should be Brown number one to start. Then Howard and Keenhold's kind of on a level, and then Sayin and Noland on a level, however you dole out the reps. And, over time, probably by practice 5 or 6, Howard is, interchanging with Brown or, supplanting him as number one. And then you just kind of go from there. And you explain it to him like this, like Sayin is, let's just say, number 4 one day and Noland is number 4 the next. If somebody's got to be 1, somebody's got to be 2, somebody's got to be 3, somebody's got to be 4, and somebody's got to be 5. And it's really not a statement on how good you are. You're all going to get opportunities, and you just manage it. You just manage it the best way that you can, but it doesn't make any sense to put Sayin and Aaron Noland out there with the first team the first 4 days. It just doesn't make any sense because they're going to stick out like a sore thumb. They're going to turn the wrong way. They're not going to know what to do. And now you've wasted reps with the first team. So you don't do that. You gradually bring them along to the level that they can handle. And by week 3, maybe one of them's moving the first team up and down the field. We got something here, and everybody sees it, and it's apparent. And then you bump them up a little bit into production and in the rotation. But it's done over time. It's not something where you just stick somebody in there to fail, because that makes no sense. So, to me, it'll be logical. Between Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, they got about 50 years of coaching experience, and they know what they're doing. So in Chip and Ryan, you have to trust. You just have to trust. If those two guys can't get you to the promised land, then who the hell will? That's kind of my feeling.
I'm not concerned about a depth chart at all right now anyway, because they're not running install. They're not, they run however many periods, 24, 27 periods. How many of them are really, 7-on-7, 11-on-11? There's just a lot of stuff where you're just going through and learning the position and doing mechanics and things of that nature. Yeah. So where you are, who you follow and who follows you is kind of immaterial at this point. Now, if there's one receiver that just always keeps dropping the ball, be like, all right, change places with me in line. I don't want to keep throwing to this dude. But, outside of that, I wouldn't get too caught up. I don't think any of us are trying to put a line on what the spring game is going to look like, if the Scarlet or the Gray is going to win there. Things will work themselves out. But to echo what both Tony and Steve said, there's just no real reason to pin yourself down and be like, you're the 1, you're the 2, you're the 3. Especially right now. And once you get into drill work and everything else, you have the cover of being like, well, the other guy was sharper, so we're going to have him run with the 3s this next practice. And you were better this time. All right, we'll have you run with the 3s, and maybe you just have some movement anyway, so everybody is having a better opportunity to work with the entire team, to work with the entire receiver core, the entire tight end core, everything else. You're not going to sit there and do something in this spring that is going to sit there and be worth 3 points in October. I'm not going to get too caught up on it.
Yeah, and with the depth chart, the spring is about the individual, getting the individual better. The team stuff comes in fall. So really, I'm sure, like Steve said, and we've seen them do this in the past with two quarterbacks, is with some days you're the one, some days you're the one. And it's always interesting. The first thing we do, the first practice we get to look at, we see who's repping first, and boom, that guy right now is the number one. And then you see the next practice, you're like, oh, new number one, because it's somebody else. And it's just like, well, they're just alternating. And that's why it's better to get a look later on in camp to see the changes. But if you don't get to see the first couple of days to see like any kind of rotation, like every time we get to see a practice, we make sweeping judgments because that's all we get to look at. Same with everybody that goes to the spring game and they see Joe Burrow outperforming Dwayne Haskins or whatever. And it's like, well, Joe Burrow is the best guy. Or they see Justin Fields go 4 of 13 or 3 of 14, whatever it was in 2019. You're like, oh my gosh, we're doomed. And it's just one practice. And you try not to make too much of it, but you do because that's our job, is to make stuff of nothing. No, not actually. But to take that information, convey it, and try to make some judgments about it. And I can't wait to see practice on Tuesday the 5th because there's a bunch of stuff I want to see. I want to know, where is Emeka Ibuka lining up? Where is Sonny Styles lining up? Where is TJ Hicks in this situation? Where is the quarterback situation, as we've talked about, and just who are the top 3 receivers, because they are kind of positionless at this point. We all want to see Jeremiah Smith. So there's a bunch of stuff to watch. First look at Caleb Downs, but it is just one practice in spring meant to improve the individual people, and especially the first 2 practices, because they have a practice Tuesday, a practice Thursday, then they go on spring break, and then they're back in like 10 days. So those first 2 practices are very easy and as low impact as you can get, maybe the 2 easiest practices of the year, which is why we should also be able to watch the entire thing, the entire practice of both days, in my opinion. But I understand none of you here are the head coach or the SID.
Yeah, and then we also get that first roster, and then we can start thinking about the video game and when it comes out and everything else. And since the way it's set up now, we won't have to spend time putting names on these numbers and everything else. But that game and having to build rosters was how I was so strong with roster numbers, not only for Ohio State, but the entire Big Ten, because right out of the box, I would put in the entire Big Ten just to be ready. So,
I could probably.
I'm going to write off my football game because it is going. I need it for work. I'm writing it off. I'm just telling you right now, Mr. IRS, I'm writing that sucker off.
I can go grab one of my Phil Steele magazines and have players checked off that I've put into the game from way back in the day, and make sure, got to get these freshmen in. They've missed these freshmen, But yeah, it was essentially a study guide, the game and the Phil Steele mag and all of that stuff, and they've taken that away from us, which is unfortunate. But I'm sure my North Texas Eagles are going to be, my Mean Green are going to be way off, way incorrect. So I'll have to fix some things there.
Tony will be that guy going out to buy either a PS5 or Xbox One, like the day that the game comes out. And he and a whole bunch of other people, and there will be fights in the streets, and these will be like Cabbage Patch Kids, and I will just be sitting there laughing.
Steve was running through, if you go through the decorum of, giving weight to the experience and who's been on campus, then you start out with this depth chart because that's the way, protocol should be. Mm-hmm. Well, Lincoln Kienholz led that prolific field goal drive in the Cotton Bowl. So shouldn't he be number 1?
Yeah, he's game battle tested, game proven. Sure.
That poor guy.
Between Sayin and Noland, is it so Sayin is generally a couple ranks higher in the recruiting rankings, and obviously once they step on field, who cares? Let's go. Let's see what you got. Is that one of those deals where the top 5 quarterbacks are all, put them in a bucket? They're the same guy in terms of not necessarily skill set, what they do well, but in terms of when it all shakes out? Or is this more of a, there's a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields in this class, and then there's a drop off. How are these guys evaluated coming into it?
I mean, I think both of them, certainly checked off a lot of boxes. Ohio State certainly kicked the tires on Sayin again before kind of opening up its search and landing on Aaron Noland. I mean, the one thing that people are going to have to get used to with Aaron Noland is he's a lefty. And I'm not necessarily saying that you have to completely coach a lefty differently, but you have to be familiar with coaching a lefty, and you have to have, there is a little bit of a different look of how the ball comes out of his hands and everything else. I mean, is Sayin like legitimately multiple rungs above Noland? No, I don't think so. But I think that there are certain things that Sayin does that's more complete than what Noland has done. But I also think that it's a case of, both of them have come out of real deal districts in their states, with Noland outside of Atlanta, with Sayin in Southern California, Southern CIF competition. They're going to be things that about each of them just based on what their rosters were and what they were able to do. Noland's Langston Hughes team here in 23 was not nearly as good as the team in 22. So people are going to be like, did he regress? Has he maxed out? Or is he done? Well, he didn't have the weapons around him. Julian Sayin out there, where he was, Calabasas or wherever, I mean, he always has dudes around him. So there's not going to be any appearance of him necessarily regressing because he has so much out there. So I'm not one to get too caught up in the rankings and being like, okay, well, this guy's just clearing away such a definitive number one that the number two guy really should be like 4 or 5. There just isn't anybody who fits in between them. I think that both guys will have their moments of where they will show a lot. It's just going to be a matter of who fits the system better and who takes to things. I mean, that's just ultimately what it comes down to.
I'm speaking the obvious here, but our Miami guy Cam Underwood on Wednesday night, he laments every week about losing Jeremiah Smith. Now he's the number 1 player in the country.
They never had him.
Speaking the obvious, but yes. Okay. Never being able to secure the signing of Jeremiah Smith.
Well, but just a Miami approach. Shows Ohio State broke Miami a long time ago.
Anyway, Mark, go on.
Sorry. I'll mute myself.
It's basically that this dude is otherworldly and should just basically step on the field, and not that he's not going to have growing pains and going to have to adjust to, the increased level of play that he's facing, but just that he's incredible kind of thing.
There are people that I respect who think he's a day 1 starter, and I'm still in the point where I'll believe it when I see it. I'm not going to know anybody to be that day 1 starter as a true freshman, but if there was somebody, it might be Jeremiah Smith, especially losing 2 starting receivers. There are opportunities, and this is not the deepest receiver room that Ohio State has had under Brian Hartline. But Ryan Day was saying he stepped right in terms of the weight room and just a hard worker, not for as much drama as there was in actually getting the signature. There's not been drama since he has been on campus, that sort of thing, and he's just gone to work. So I think it also depends on where Emeka Egbuka is playing in terms of if Jeremiah Smith is a day 1 starter, but he's still, Carnell Tate lost his black stripe after 5 spring practices. So that's the watermark for me right now on Jeremiah Smith. And if he passes that, then we can start talking. Then I will start believing more and more. Not that I'm a disbeliever, but I want to see something first. Because I will say spring practice, Garrett Wilson in 2019, Jackson Smith and Jigba in 2020. Those 2 guys, Jackson Smith and Jigba in 2020 was some of the most incredible stuff I've ever seen in just 1 spring practice. And that was before the world shut down. He was catching everything, making people look silly. The only drop he had, it wasn't even a drop. It was just a catch out of bounds, falling in traffic. And so I want to see something like that from Jeremiah Smith. And if I do, then we can talk. And not that we won't talk about him more, but I want to see it first, and then we can go from there. But I'll set the over under on Black Stripe practices at like 4.5 because either you're not as good, or maybe should we just go an even 5? And can you either beat Carnell Tate or not?